halls of West Virginia resound with the sound of Golden Blue football.
Almost heaven, West Virginia.
Now let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50, the 10, the 5. A touchdown, West Virginia. He did it.
He did it. Patrick White. Touchdown, Tay Von Austin.
But Don Nehlen's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels feared to tread.
I think you think that these guys are going to fall over dead for you. Well, I got news for you. They're going to punch you right in the mouth. It's Mountaineer pride!
Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football. West Virginia football.
Leave no doubt tonight. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue. Not this night.
They've done it. They've done it. A perfect season. And the Mountaineers, for the first time in history, undefeated and untied.
Don Nehlen and his Mountaineers, for the second time, have finished a regular season with an unblemished mark.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
And now recorded from the CRW studios in Almost Heaven, West Virginia, it's the Country Roads webcast with your host, Jorden Cruz.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the CRW podcast here for Season 7, Episode 193. Going to review and react to West Virginia's 49-14 win over Albany in Game 2 of the 2024 WVU football season. Mountaineers get one in the win column, move to 1-1 overall here on this young season, and now get set to take on Pitt in the upcoming backyard brawl next week. Before we get there, we got to talk about what happened in this game against Albany. I'm going to give some of my thoughts. We'll take a look at the stats, and then we'll take a look around the Big 12, other scores around the conference that happened here in Week 2. Before we get done here with episode 193, that's kind of the slate for you guys. So where do we want to start here? I think that the place that we kind of have to start here when I'm talking thoughts from this game is we got to talk about that big elephant in the room over here, right? We can't just let that slip by and not talk about it. I will highlight some positives, but obviously the thing that everyone's talking about after this game really is the pass defense. That's the elephant in the room right now. West Virginia's pass defense leaving a lot to be desired in the first 2 weeks of the 2024 season. Against Penn State, we kind of were more accepting of it. We were, chalking up to Andy Kotelnicki, his ability to design good schemes. He does do some good things there on offense that really can put your defense in peril a lot of times. And I think then after this game against an FCS opponent in Albany, now maybe we're a little bit worried about what's going on there on the back end of West Virginia's defense. Because all in all, I know I want to talk more about the positives in a bit, but the defense as a whole, not too shabby. The rush defense really held Albany to, I think it was only like 20 yards rushing before that final drive when they broke off some runs to get to their ultimate number, which we'll talk about here in a bit when we get to the stats. But really, West Virginia, they did a better job pressuring the passer. They did better with their gap integrity than they did in Week 1. But it's just the problems there on the secondary and the back end that have a lot of Mountaineer fans worried after this game against Albany because it's an FCS opponent. The quarterback, Miles Burkett, really didn't show a lot in, the first week of the season, so you thought maybe he'd be able to play better, and instead he comes out, throws for over 300 yards. West Virginia gives up the most yardage they've ever given up to an FCS team passing-wise, so those are things that can be red flags when you look at them for sure. A couple of things about that. One, they mentioned in the post-game interviews that West Virginia was playing very vanilla on defense. They don't want to show too much of their things that may have changed in coverage for Pitt to have film on that heading into the backyard brawl, which is understandable. If you guys remember last year, it was kind of similar. Penn State, they really thought their secondary struggled. They wanted to make some changes on how they were covering things. But the second week, we had Duquesne, so they didn't, showcase those changes they made in the coverages. They kept it very vanilla, and, they struggled some in the first half of that game pass coverage-wise. Then Game 3 turned around against Pitt in that game as well, funny enough, and they put that stuff together that they had worked on after the Penn State game, and they showcased those new coverages, those adjustments. So do I think that the defense that we played against Albany will be the same defense that we play against Penn State? I certainly do not, or against Pitt, rather, I guess I should say. I certainly do not. I think that they probably did make some adjustments after that Penn State game, but they wanted to just keep it very vanilla, play some base defense in this game against Albany because they thought they had the athletes to be able to do it, and they thought they had the cornerbacks that could play man-to-man. That's kind of what the main concern is coming out of this one. It seems like every time we've tried to go man-to-man this year, it hasn't worked out for us. You look, into the half against Penn State, they give up a touchdown. Into the half here against Albany, the same thing occurs. And it kind of what leads me to wonder is, what is going wrong in the evaluation process throughout fall camp and leading up to these games that allow these coaches to think that certain cornerbacks are really going to shine when the season starts? And then once that season does start, it's kind of the complete opposite. Some of those guys are really struggling because you look back last year, going back to 2023, Andrew Wilson-Lamp and Beanie Bishop come out there as your starting cornerbacks game one of the season. Well, we all know that by game 3, Andrew Wilson-Lamp was nowhere to be found in the lineup, reverted to only playing special teams, really never played any snaps at corner hardly throughout the rest of the season. It was Malachi Ruffin that took that other cornerback spot opposite Beanie Bishop, and both of those guys were your 2 corners for the entire 2023 season. Fast forward now to 2024, they get some transfers in. They bring several in the defensive back room, actually. And, you come out game 1, you start Garnett Hollis and you start Aiden Garnes. And here we are after game 2, and I would not be surprised to see one of those guys, probably maybe be pulled from the lineup, see a lesser role for the second consecutive year. Last year was Andrew Wilson-Lamp. This year, it's looking like it may be Garnett Hollis. We'll see if that remains to be true. We'll see what adjustments they make coming into this Pitt game when we get to it here in the Backyard Brawl this upcoming week. We'll see what happens when they, make those changes in the secondary if they do go with some new starters there. I think Aiden Garnes will probably still be out there on the field, but on the other side, do they give somebody else a chance besides Garnett Hollis? That is the silver lining here, guys, is the fact that West Virginia did bring in a ton of defensive backs in the offseason. Like I said, at least 6. So they were prepared in case something did occur like it did in 2023, where one of the guys they thought was going to pan out didn't pan out. If they get hit with the injury bug, they have plenty of, plan Bs in place for this type of event. So I'm not going to be surprised at all if West Virginia says, hey, we got an open competition at one cornerback spot here throughout, this practice week. That may be what they come out and say in press conferences this week. I don't know. That's what I would say if I was one of the coaches here following these first 2 games. Let's see what we got with one of these other guys. Let's see what TJ Crandall can do. Let's see what Jacoby Spells can do. Because, Jacoby Spells, they said that he had improved a lot. I know he was dealing with an injury in the spring. Seems like he's finally back healthy. He did get some snaps late in this game, and honestly, he looked pretty good in those snaps. And it was against the same personnel because Albany kept their starters in for pretty much this entire game. So it's not like he was going up against the backups, and that's why he looked better. He looked good against pretty much the same personnel. So that's what the big red flag is right now. What we're going to need answers on is West Virginia's pass defense. But the optimistic side of me is thinking if they can make the necessary changes there, if they come out against Pitt and look better in the Backyard Brawl on pass defense, then I think this can still be a good football team, a really good football team potentially, because the offense looked great. They did have a couple of issues. One, they had to punt once. They had the one turnover where Jaheim got a little loose with the ball, which you hate to see because he was having such a good game. But in this game, we'll talk a little bit about the positives now. The offense had 2 drives of 90-plus yards. One went 95 if you count a penalty that they incurred on the opening of that drive. And then, of course, after the defense's goal line stand, you drive the ball 99 yards and get a touchdown. So a 95-yard drive and a 99-yard drive, nothing to shake your head at there. This offense really did some good things. You get both running backs over 100 yards. That's a plus. Garrett Green looked really good, had a good completion percentage, which is what you like to see. And West Virginia did that as well with being very vanilla on offense, too. You saw a lot of the same play calls, not a ton of the motions and shifts that we normally do, just a lot of, straight outside zone, inside zone, some play action looks off of that. Nothing too exotic. I'd say, maybe we've seen 50% of the playbook. They're probably really going to unveil some things against Pitt that we haven't seen yet this season, which will be nice. But I think the offense really showed some improvement on some things that we were hoping to see, for me, coming out of week one, the one thing I was hoping to see was us play better in the trenches. I think the offensive line played a lot better. I think the defensive line played a lot better. West Virginia did give up one sack, but, Neil Brown mentioned that was more on the running back missing his assignment there in a pass pro than it was on the offensive line. So it seems like hardly any missed assignments on the offensive line this week, which is really good. The left side of that offensive line looks extremely strong with Wyatt Milam and Thomas Remack. West Virginia is going to be able to run behind those guys pretty consistently and do some damage. And if Garrett Green's passing the football like he was in this game on Saturday, I think it's going to be a bright spot because we have a lot of weapons on the offensive side. It's just that defense that we've got to get shaped up a little bit. And like I said, it's not all bad. The linebackers look great this year. Trotter obviously has been, a man among boys throughout this early part of the season. Reed Carrico, I think, has probably been one of the more surprising bright spots. To me, the two players that have really stood out that, aren't necessarily starters or weren't necessarily considered starters heading into the season are both on that defensive side, with Reed Carrico at the linebacker spot and TJ Jackson down on the defensive line, which it's good that TJ Jackson's really showing some shine there because we're going to need it. One negative point coming out of this game is unfortunately the injury to Eddie V, Steady Eddie as I like to call him here. Within the first couple of series there, goes down. Lower leg injury, didn't look good, limped off the field slowly, immediately took him back to the locker room. I believe Neil Brown said they did an MRI by the time the game was done, and he's going to be out at least, a couple of weeks. So West Virginia is going to have to find some answers on that defensive line. Does TJ Jackson come in and start and you slide Sean Martin over to play the defensive tackle spot, or do you bring Asani Redwood in to start and you keep the firepower that you have with TJ Jackson coming in off the bench there, and he's done such a good job of that. We'll see how West Virginia decides to play that, but the defensive line will look a little bit different in the backyard brawl against Pitt following that injury to Eddie V. I'm trying to think of what else I had positive here. Let me pull up my notes. Took some there sitting in the stands. Jaheim White, definitely a positive for me. You guys know I'm a huge fan of Jaheim. 30 yards on his first 2 carries. Had the 14-yard touchdown run on 2nd and 8 there in the first quarter for West Virginia's first touchdown of the game. And then unfortunately does have the one negative spot where he broke nearly a 40-yard run. I think it was a 39-yard run, but just fighting for extra yardage. They stripped the ball from him. Hopefully it's a learning experience. The silver lining there is if you're going to have that happen, let's have it happen in one of these games against an FCS opponent versus, down the line in a close game, in a big-time battle where you're playing maybe a top 25 team, you're playing a conference team, you're in the backyard brawl. At least it happened in a game when West Virginia was well ahead at that point and pretty much had the game in hand. It's a hard lesson for him to learn. After that, West Virginia went with CJ pretty much exclusively for the rest of the game, but the positive side of that is CJ Donaldson really ran hard. Looked a little bit like he did in his freshman year, ends up as leading rusher for West Virginia on the day. But anytime you get 2 running backs over 100 yards, that's a great performance. West Virginia ran the football at will, and if they're able to do that, I know this was against Albany, right? So, take it with a grain of salt maybe, but if they're able to do that in the backyard brawl coming up, if they're able to do that with the other teams on their schedule, it's going to really open things up for this offense, open up those play action deep shots they like to take. So getting the run game going and getting it going early and often against Albany was a very positive sign for this offense. And then on the defensive side, I did mention Josiah Trotter. He had a TFL on the very first play of the day for West Virginia. Continues to be a huge bright spot there for that defense. And then one thing I mentioned in our preview for this game was what was West Virginia going to do at safety, because we know Tarnu got taken out there after starting the season there, and Jaheim Joseph really played a lot better playing, the rest of that game. And indeed, West Virginia did turn to Jaheim Joseph to now start at the cat safety position, which I think is a great move because he really has done a good job there in the secondary. One of the few bright spots that West Virginia has had in that secondary has been Jaheim Joseph, so I like him being a starter now. Now you kind of beg the question of what other changes come in the secondary, and that's certainly going to be a talking point throughout this week as we get closer and closer to the backyard brawl. But Rodney Gallagher, played again on both sides and made plays on both sides. Interestingly enough, a 20-yard reception on offense, had a couple of good receptions on that side, and then had a pass breakup on defense that could have potentially been an interception. You'd like to see him come down with that pick. But one thing that he did do on that play was he got his head turned around, which has been kind of the bugaboo for these West Virginia corners a lot is, that's kind of one of the good things that makes me think that this pass defense can be improved and can be corrected with its mistakes, because when teams have been completing these passes, it's not like guys are running free because of missed assignments a lot. Really, West Virginia's had there and been, in coverage, sometimes right on the guy, but they're just not playing the ball when it's in the air. They got to do a better job of playing the ball when it's in the air. They've had good recovery speed when they've gotten beat, and they've caught back up to the plays, but they've either gotten pass interference calls because they're just playing, face up with the receiver, never turning around to, try and break up the pass, or they could have broken up the pass if they had turned their head around, or maybe even gotten interceptions at a couple of different occasions. So we'll see what happens there in the secondary, but I definitely think it's something that can be improved and is going to have to be improved for West Virginia, certainly moving forward here in 2024. Does that mean we see more Jacoby Spells, more TJ Crandall, more Dantes Fagan, less Garnett Hollis? That remains to be seen. Does West Virginia keep the safeties the same? Do you keep playing Anthony Wilson at free, who's been playing good this year, and Jaheim Joseph at cat safety? It really just depends what you're doing at that spear spot, which seems like it's been, Aubrey Burks there, obviously, to start the game. And then when you go to, kind of your nickel package, it's been Rodney Gallagher. So we'll see what West Virginia does in the secondary moving forward. Going to be something to keep an eye on throughout this week, and wonder if the coaches will talk about it or not in press conferences coming up soon. I'm sure it's an issue they know they need to address. I'm sure they're making the moves to address it. Then, you spread the ball around on offense a good bit. We're going to look at the numbers here in just a second, but Justin Robinson gets his first touchdown as a Mountaineer with a red zone touchdown. And we know that's one of the reasons they brought him in, was to help in the red zone. He gets a red zone TD in this game, so that's good to see. And then Garrett Green, one of the bright spots for me, because something they talked about after Penn State was Garrett Green, had opportunities to run. He didn't take them. This game, he definitely seemed more apt to do that, and even broke off a 40-yard touchdown run on a quarterback draw play, which yet again, in a 2-minute drill situation, Garrett Green's so good in those 2-minute drills, and executes another one here in this football game. So all in all, can't really complain too much about a 49-14 win. Get those trouble areas, those areas of concern cleaned up, and you should have a good chance in the backyard brawl this upcoming week, and we're excited to talk about that later in the week. We should have all hands on deck for that episode. Bradley and Steven out on assignment, missing this one, but we should have all hands on deck for the backyard brawl preview and predictions coming out here in middle point of this week. But that being said, guys, we're going to take a look at some stats from this game. And as a fan, that's one of my favorite things to do, is look at stats. So we'll pull those up and look at the West Virginia Albany stats, and then we'll wrap up the show by taking a look around the Big 12 there. But before we get there, speaking of as a fan, when you travel to these games, for the Mountaineers, sometimes I know if you're like me, coming from the bottom part of the state in Mercer County, you got to drive, 3 hours up, 3 hours back. And then I had to turn around today on Sunday and go work a 9-hour shift. So definitely something that could take a lot out of you. But one thing that can keep you going when you're having to deal with those things, and helps me a ton, is Magic Mind, guys. Normally you would think going up, driving to the game, watching the game, driving back, getting home late, not getting a ton of rest, then turning around, going to work, you might be a little sluggish. You might not have a ton of energy. But with Magic Mind, that'll never be the case. Keeps you focused, gives you great energy. You can still combine it with your regular caffeine usage. So if you're a coffee drinker like me, not only can you still have the Magic Mind with it, but actually you'll receive even better benefits of that coffee throughout the day. There's no caffeine crash, because Magic Mind uses time release to consistently have your caffeine effective all day long. That's why I'm able to still record this episode with energy. I'll be able to edit it with energy, is because of Magic Mind. So guys, I don't know why you haven't tried Magic Mind yet. If you haven't, you definitely should. Not only do you have all those great benefits, but it's also 100% guaranteed you'll enjoy it, or you'll get your money back within 100 days of purchase. That's the Magic Mind guarantee. So, you got that, and then you get a discount from us here at the Country Roads Webcast that you can use. Just use the code CountryLT20 at checkout, and you can get 48% off your first subscription. Or if you just want to try it out that one time, you can still get 20% off in that case as well. So just head over to magicmind.com/CountryLT and try yours today. Can't recommend it enough, guys. Get that Magic Mind and use that code CountryLT20 at checkout when you head over to magicmind.com/CountryLT. That being said, guys, let's get into the numbers here. Let's take a look at the stats from this game. We're going to dive into the team stats first, then we'll look at some of the top individual performers for the Mountaineers. All right, now as I pull them up here on the screen for you guys on the video side, I got to touch on one last positive before I run through these numbers, and that, of course, is the lights at the stadium. Man, that was awesome. They played a little light show at the end of the third quarter, and then, of course, when the it was in the second half when we really got to get into this, because that's when the sun went down with the game, starting at 6. But when West Virginia would score a touchdown, they would, flash gold and blue, and it really just gave such an awesome atmosphere to this game. I love the new lights. Hopefully we get more night games to use them in, because they are an awesome addition to the atmosphere there at Mountaineer Field. Definitely had to credit that. Super hype about the lights and how all the new adjustments. Not only does it look better with, the LED lights automatically, but then the light shows the stuff they're able to do, flashing them gold and blue, flashing them red, white, and blue at one point as well. So much fun stuff they can do with those. So definitely wanted to highlight that. And that being said, guys, let's talk some team stats here. If you're watching on the video version, you can see them here on the screen. If you're tuning on the audio version, I'll run them down for you. Team stats: West Virginia 31 first downs, Albany 21 first downs. And that 31 first down number is really good for West Virginia, because I think they only ran about 58 total plays in this game. So 31 first downs on 58 total plays. You can't really play much better offense than that. I know West Virginia wanted to be perfect. They wanted to score on every possession. Garrett Green mentioned they had, the couple possessions they did, and they had the one punt, and then they had the one where Jaheim White fumbled. But still, all in all, very good for the Mountaineers. Third down efficiency, West Virginia does need to do a better job there. They were 1 of 6, Albany 7 of 16. But the ones that West Virginia didn't convert, you look at fourth down efficiency, West Virginia got every fourth down attempt. They attempted 3, they got 3. Albany not so much, 2 of 5. One of those being a great goal line stand by the West Virginia defense. Albany had it down on the 1-yard line. West Virginia 4 straight stops there, so do got to credit the defense for that. West Virginia with a big advantage in total yards, 553 to 374 for Albany. Passing yards, this is where, that rears its ugly head. 306 yards for Albany, 248 for the Mountaineers. WVU much better, completion percentage better in the yards per attempt there as well, 9.5 to the 7.8 for Albany. Neither team throws an interception. And like I said, West Virginia's run defense, though, was very good in this game. They hold Albany to under 100 yards rushing. They end up with 68. And I think before their final drive, when West Virginia had some of their reserves in on defense, they had maybe, I want to say 17 yards rushing, 21 yards rushing, something like that. It was below 30 yards rushing that Albany had before they got a few more there on their final couple of drives to get to that number of 68. But still an excellent job by West Virginia in run defense. And I think they've shown for the most part, save for a couple long Nick Singleton runs where there were some mistakes there, the West Virginia's run defense has been pretty good this season. It's the pass defense that needs to improve, but West Virginia runs for over 300 yards in this game. Anytime West Virginia does that, they're going to win more than they lose. I've talked about Neil Brown's success when West Virginia has success running the ball here at WVU, and that continues that trend here in this one. 305 yards rushing on only 32 attempts, nearly 10 yards a carry, 9.5 for the Mountaineers. Good job there. Penalties, 7 for 62 yards for Albany, 5 for 44 for the Mountaineers. WVU does have the one turnover there on the Jaheim White fumble. And Albany actually wins the time of possession battle, 35 minutes to West Virginia's 24. You could tell that was Albany's strategy. They wanted to kind of take the air out of the ball, try and keep West Virginia's offense off the field as much as possible. Didn't work out the best, and West Virginia did score quick when they had it a lot. But Albany, that's what they were trying to do, and that's why West Virginia, only ended up with 58 plays in this game and didn't get a chance to get as much backups in as they would have liked. Nico did get the one drive and did get a touchdown, but with the way Albany was playing, West Virginia didn't get a ton of their secondary guys in like they were kind of hoping to. But as far as the guys that did get in, let's take a look at the box score here, some of the individual standout numbers. You see Garrett Green, 17 to 23, 236 yards and 3 touchdowns. Nico on his drive, 3 of 3 for 12 yards. And then the rushing. Mentioned C.J. Donaldson was the team's leading rusher, 14 carries, 125 yards and a touchdown. Jaheim White, exactly 10 yards per carry, 10 carries, 100 yards and a touchdown. Can't ask for much more than that, especially when you didn't see a ton of Jaheim White in the second half of this football game. Jaheim's so explosive. I hope he really continues that throughout this season. We're going to need him in the backyard brawl. And then Garrett Green gets his run game going here against Albany. Mentioned they wanted to see more of that against Penn State. Felt they had opportunities there. Didn't really capitalize on him. This game he does. 7 carries, 68 yards, and a touchdown. And then Nico Marchiol, 1 carry, 12 yards, and a touchdown. Nice read by him on a jet sweep where he had to, make the decision, hand it off or keep it. Made the correct decision to keep it himself. Ran into the end zone for the 12-yard touchdown. So good job by Nico there on that one. Receiving wise, got to shout out Seven McGee for Albany. I talked about him in the preview episode and in our live stream before the game, and he was really everything that he was cracked up to be. Transfer from Oregon previously, super fast. We didn't have anyone in the secondary that really could keep up with his speed, I don't think. 4 catches for 90 yards, and in the second half, he was dealing with some cramp issues, or he may have had an even bigger game than that. So that guy's a good player, and wouldn't be surprised to see him back at the FBS level maybe next season if he decides to hit the portal. He's a really good player. For West Virginia, you see here, no one over 50 yards receiving, but look how much we spread the ball around there. Multiple guys catching passes here. Cole Taylor comes away as the leader, 3 catches, 47 yards, and a touchdown. Hudson Clement, 4 catches, 39 yards, and a touchdown of his own. And Jaden Bray finally getting into the mix there. 1 catch, 44 yards, and it was a great grab for him on a good throw there from GG down the field. Traylon Ray, 3 catches, 35 yards. Rodney Gallagher, as I mentioned, playing both ways and made plays on both sides. 3 catches, 34 yards. Justin Robinson, 2 catches, 30 yards, 1 being the touchdown that I mentioned. Day Farmer had a reception for 10 yards. Probably should have had his first career touchdown. Unfortunately, couldn't hang on to the pass, but he's going to get one maybe this season. We'll see what happens, but definitely could have had one, but I think he's going to be an explosive player throughout his career. Preston Fox, 1 for 5. Jack Samarco, the young tight end there, the freshman for the Mountaineers, getting a catch in this game. 1 catch for 4 yards, and Traylon Davis with the catch, but did not net any yards on it. Defensive numbers. Now let's talk a little bit about West Virginia getting in the backfield some in this game. TFLs. You get a TFL and a half shared by Trey Lathan and Tyron Bradley. Get a TFL from Reed Carrico. Get a TFL from Aubrey Burks. TFL from Ty French. TFL from Josiah Trotter. TFL from Sean Martin. And 2 TFLs from TJ Jackson, who has 3 in his first 2 games for the Mountaineers. I think he's a guy that's going to continue to get more and more reps. Eddie V, before his injury, did share a tackle for a loss with Asani Redwood, as both of them end up with a half a tackle for a loss. All in all, 9 TFLs for the Mountaineers. And they get 2 sacks as well. 1 from Sean Martin and 1 from the aforementioned TJ Jackson. So good to see both your defensive ends there getting in on the action. 2 sacks for the Mountaineers. Leading tacklers, Anthony Wilson shows up there yet again, 6 total tackles. Ben Cutter and Trey Lathan both have 5. Reed Carrico with 4. Jaheim Joseph with 4. Tyron Bradley with 4. So there you see kind of the leading tacklers there for the Mountaineers. Josiah Trotter with 3 in this game. Really mixed up the linebackers. A lot of guys got a reps there. And, you know, from Carrico to Lathan to Ben Cutter to, of course, Josiah Trotter. I thought they all looked pretty good. Love the depth West Virginia has to the linebacker spot. Just have to figure out something there in the defensive back room, and we'll see what happens there. You see Jacoby Spells did get some snaps there late. So Dantes Fagan played again as well. TJ Crandall got several snaps in this game. So we'll see what West Virginia does with the secondary moving forward. But there's a stat breakdown. And so we'll get ready to talk about the Big 12 scores from week 2. But before we do that, as is tradition here on our Review and Reaction podcast, after wins, got to hand out our players of the game on each side. Player of the game on offense, if it wasn't for the fumble, I would have probably had to go Jaheim White. You know, CJ Donaldson's a good candidate, but I think Garrett Green has to take these honors here for me. So my player of the game on offense is going to be Garrett Green. Needed a bounce back performance from him after that game against Penn State. He comes and he delivers it. You know, good completion percentage, takes care of the football, throws 3 touchdowns, runs for nearly 70 yards, breaks off an impressive 40-yard touchdown run where he really showed the wheels there on that QB draw play and execute another 2-minute drill. So Garrett Green comes back, looks a little bit more like the QB that we expect him to look like here in 2024, and I think he's going to continue to just get better and better as the season moves along. GG is going to be a big catalyst for wins for West Virginia here this season, so we need him to continue to play like that. Player of the game on defense, I think after looking at those numbers, guys, I'm going TJ Jackson. Obviously, he gets the sack. He gets the 2 TFLs. Those are big-time plays, and he just has such energy that he's been bringing when he's coming off the bench for West Virginia here in the early portion of this season, both against Penn State and against Albany as well. Now, I've been very impressed with TJ Jackson and how he's played. I think he's earned himself some more reps. We'll see if he gets into the starting lineup now with the unfortunate injury to Eddie V, or if they still want to bring him in, have that spark off the bench, kind of be the, you know, what they would call the 6th man in basketball. I guess it'd be the 12th man in football, but he definitely seems to bring that spark when he comes onto the field. So we'll see how West Virginia decides to play that. But players of the game for me, Garrett Green on offense, TJ Jackson on defense. And then I'll kind of wrap up my thoughts here on the Albany game. Now let's take a look around the Big 12 before we get set to wrap up episode 193 here. And let's look at some scores from around the conference here in week 2. All right, so talking about around the Big 12 here, the scores from this past week, BYU gets a nice win on the road at SMU on Friday night, 18-15. Did get a chance to watch most of this game, and it was a good performance by BYU. A lot of people had SMU favored. It was a back-and-forth battle, but BYU just made the plays down the stretch that they needed to win this football game. So shout out to BYU getting the win over the ACC there at SMU. And then Saturday, moving into Saturday slate, where there were some really interesting results here. Kansas State survives 34-27 over Tulane on the road. That was another hard-fought battle back and forth. I know you're thinking, oh, man, against a G5 school, but Tulane's no slouch. That's a good program, and Kansas State is able to come out there with a victory, so it's a win for the Big 12 at least there. And then, unfortunately, Pittsburgh defeats Cincinnati 28-27. And this was a game that I had written off early. I listened, to a little bit of it on my travel up to Morgantown there, and Cincinnati was off to it. It was like 21-0, 21-6, whatever it was. A 3-touchdown margin. I was like, oh, they got this in the bag. And even late in the third quarter, Cincinnati was up 27-6. Pittsburgh, though, goes on a big run. Ends up winning this game 28-27. They kick a field goal there late to get the win. Pittsburgh with a huge come-from-behind win, and they're going to be riding high now coming in the backyard brawl this coming week. They're coming in at 2-0, beat Kent State, beat Cincinnati, and the thing is, they're feeling pretty good about their passing attack as well. New quarterback in Holstein there. They got a new offensive coordinator, and especially, looking at how West Virginia struggled in the secondary, they're probably thinking they can throw the football around on us a little bit. Got Mumfeld. Their running back is really good, not only as a running back, but as catching passes as well. He had over 100 yards receiving in this game to go with his 100-and-some plus rushing yards as well. So Pittsburgh does have some weapons at the skill positions West Virginia is going to have to account for. It's not going to be the cakewalk that we maybe thought this was coming into the season when we didn't know what Pitt had, especially playing on the road there in Pittsburgh. It's going to be an interesting matchup. We'll talk more about that later in the week. But Pittsburgh beating Cincinnati 28-27. They're going to come into it riding high at 2-0. So hopefully we get a chance to knock them off that high horse. That's what we're hoping to do here in Mountaineer Nation. Moving on here. Another game that was great in the conference, Arkansas and Oklahoma State. This one ended up going into double overtime, but, the Big 12 defeats the SEC in this one. Oklahoma State somehow wins this game despite the fact that Arkansas outgaining them massively in total yardage. I think it was 500-something to 300-something, but Oklahoma State, man, you can never count out Mike Gundy. They're always going to find a way, and this was with Ollie Gordon really not playing a great game. Oklahoma State still finds a way to get it done. They did look a little susceptible defensively as well, kind of dealing with some of the same problems that, West Virginia, we've talked about with them, but we've seen from other Big 12 teams as well. Texas Tech being one that we've seen get torched through the air in a couple of games. But Oklahoma State finds a way to get it done. Both teams here missed field goals in the first overtime period. Then Oklahoma State scores in the second overtime period and gets the 2-point conversion. Arkansas's offense sputters, and Oklahoma State gets the home win there in Stillwater, 39-31 over Arkansas. Utah 23-12 over Baylor. I think a little bit closer than a lot of us would have thought, but they did get up to an early lead. Baylor, a couple scores late there to make the score a little bit more respectable. But the interesting thing to watch coming out of this game is both teams injured their quarterbacks. Daquan Finn at Baylor dealing with an injury, and Cameron Rising at Utah as well had his fingers taped up, I believe, on his throwing hand. So we'll see if anything is to come of that, if there's any injuries to report on with those guys moving forward. But Utah defeats Baylor in what is not a conference game, despite them being in the same conference. One of a couple games that were pre-scheduled that will be played between conference members, but not counted as conference games. Utah gets the win there. How about the Cyclones of Iowa State? 20-19, they get the win over Iowa, and they do it by kicking a game-winning field goal that was 50-plus yards and probably would have been good from 60. Their kicker really got his leg into that one, and I think he was a walk-on as well, so awesome job there. A lot of people have talked about Matt Campbell not being able to beat Iowa. I had my doubts about him going into this game, but Iowa got off to a double-digit lead, and Iowa State came storming back to get the win here. Jalen Noel looks really good at receiver there. Rocco Beck's doing a great job quarterbacking that offense, and they hit the over as well. I think the total for this game was 35, and they actually went over that in this one as they put up 39 combined points, surprisingly, here in the Cyhawk game there. Iowa State gets the win on the road, takes down Iowa. Another good win for the Big 12 there, 20-19. Of course, the Mountaineers, we talked about their 49-14 win over Albany. UCF handles Sam Houston 45-14, and they run the ball very effectively yet again. Their run game looks like it's going to be something to be reckoned with this year within the conference. They've got good backs there. RJ Harvey, they have another transfer in Penny Boone, and we know Gus Malzahn can really craft a good rushing offense. So UCF's a team to watch thus far. Take it with a grain of salt because the competition they've played, but their rushing offense has been lethal thus far in the season as they beat Sam Houston 45-14. How about Kansas? Didn't see this one coming, going on the road to Illinois. Knew it would probably be a battle, but did not see Kansas falling there. They lose 23-17, and I think the story here is, Kansas with a good running back in Devin Neal, but seemed like they didn't give him enough carries and really went to the air a lot. We know that they don't have Kotelnicki. They have Jeff Grimes in there now. Are they still getting adjusted to the new scheme? What's happening? Who knows? We'll see what happens, moving forward with them. We get to see them in a couple of weeks. But Jalen Daniels looked very turnover prone in this game. I believe he threw 3 interceptions. One of them was a pick 6. And in a game where you lose by, 6 points, that's a huge difference there. So Kansas definitely going to need Jalen Daniels to play better if they're going to throw the ball around that much or attempt to here in 2024. And still some questions remain about the Kansas offense now after losing Andy Kotelnicki, especially here in their first game against another Power 5 club, losing on the road and only putting up 17 points with some turnover issues. We'll see what happens, but I'm feeling a little bit better about how West Virginia can match up against that Kansas team. We'll have to see if West Virginia makes the improvements they need to make coming up this week against the Backyard Brawl before we see how good we feel about coming back home and starting Big 12 play against that Kansas club. But they do fall 23-17 to Illinois. Nebraska, as expected here on the CRW, said Nebraska by 2+ TDs. That's exactly what they do. 18-point win, 28-10. Nebraska takes down Colorado. And Colorado, man, to me, they just don't really look much improved to what they were last year. Still have the same offensive line issues, still have the same shaky defense. Shadur Sanders did not play well. They only managed 10 points. And the Nebraska, now with a better quarterback and Dylan Raiola is able to take advantage of Colorado's shaky defense. 28-10 win for Nebraska. And hey, don't look now, but Matt Rule has Nebraska looking pretty good. He might be able to right the ship there. And one of the most surprising outcomes of the week here, though, comes in Norman. Oklahoma, I thought, would absolutely handle Houston after Houston had the 20-point loss to UNLV in week 1. But Houston comes out and plays really well against Oklahoma, holding them to 16 points. There's a lot of changes there on that Oklahoma offense, new offensive coordinator, new signal caller. But holding them to 16 points, Houston's defense definitely looked a lot better this week. Houston only managed just 12 on the offensive side, but 16-12, I don't think many people had them getting that close to Oklahoma. So maybe, Willie Fritz is able to, turn things a little bit here and get them going in the right direction here in his first year. Still going to be an uphill climb, I think. But Houston, maybe not as bad as we thought they would be there after week 1. They only fall 16-12. Oklahoma gets the win there in Norman. TCU against Long Island, not much to say about this one. We know this Long Island team. I think that when we played them a couple years ago, it was 66-0. So TCU performed similarly, 45-0 in this game. They get the win in Fort Worth. Texas Tech, man, continuing their struggles, unfortunately. Their defense just doesn't look that great here through 2 weeks. We saw Abilene Christian put up 500 yards passing, 50-some points. So, in 2 games, they've given up 88 points, I believe, if I'm counting that correctly, in their first 2 games of the year. So that's another team that's really looking to see their defense improve. They also didn't have their running back, Taj Brooks, in this game. How long is he going to be out? That's going to affect them moving forward in the 2024 season, especially with Baron Morton struggling as he did there on offense, and their defense just a lot of holes. Washington State puts up 37, beats them 37-16 in a game that was never really that close. Another surprising result, though, Arizona was actually down at halftime to Northern Arizona. They come out in the second half, perform a lot better to get the 22-10 win, but seems like, maybe they're not going to be as good as a lot of people were expecting as well. But that's a team I'm still currently worried about when West Virginia's having the issues that we are in the secondary. Fafita and T-Mac scare me when we got to go down there and play them at Arizona. Hopefully we were able to right that ship in our secondary before we get to that game. And maybe the surprise of the Big 12 thus far is Arizona State really performing as well as they have. They get the win over Wyoming handily, and a lot of people thought that would be a good game. And then they turn around here in week 2 and beat Mississippi State. Get a win over the SEC 30-23. their running back Scatabo, 30-plus carries, 200-some rushing yards. He's going to be someone they continue to feed. So, the Fighting Kenny Dillingham's now maybe going to surprise some people this year. They were picked last in the conference. Maybe they've used that for motivation, much like West Virginia did last year, and are looking to be, not there when the season's final standings are released. They're looking to be somewhere more towards the middle of the pack, maybe, because they've definitely been a surprise here through 2 weeks, especially getting a win over SEC club there. Another good win for the Big 12, 30-23. Arizona State gets it done there. So that will wrap us up here for our Big 12 recap in week 2 as West Virginia now turns the page and we get set and get ready for Pitt Hate Week, guys. That's right. The Backyard Brawl coming up this coming Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Going to be on ESPN2. And we got a ton to talk about with that game. We'll be releasing our preview and predictions episode towards the middle of this week. Look forward on Wednesday or Thursday, guys. But having said that, when we talk about West Virginia, a win is a win. And, a 30-plus point win is always good. West Virginia, covered the spread. Good teams win, great teams cover. So West Virginia does cover this at least. I know there's questions in the secondary. Hopefully those get answered this week, and hopefully they really shake some things out and make some improvements there. But, the silver lining is the Big 12 still looks wide open as ever, and if West Virginia is able to, get the things wrong, corrected that they're struggling with in those certain areas, I think that West Virginia still has a great chance to win this conference moving forward. They've got the offense to do it. They seem to have a pretty solid defense, minus that one, glaring hole that we're seeing thus far, but it's something that can be corrected. And I think that they've got the pieces and the talent and the depth to be able to make those necessary corrections. We just have to hope that they pay off and they come to fruition, starting with this upcoming game against Pittsburgh this Saturday. We'll be looking forward to it. Know you guys all are as well. Just want to say before we wrap up, appreciate you guys tuning in, whether you tune in the video version here on YouTube. If you are tuned into that version, be sure to just take a quick second, hit the thumbs up button, give us a like on the video. Really helps a ton with the YouTube algorithm. But if you're listening on the audio version, we appreciate you doing that as well. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, you name it. Just search for Country Roads Webcast. If you listen there on the audio side, leave us a rating. That really helps us out there as well. Preferably a 5-star rating, but hey, give us what you think that we deserve. And like I said, look out for our Pittsburgh Backyard Brawl preview and predictions episode coming later this week. Most likely Wednesday or Thursday is when that'll be out. You can follow us on social media at WVU Country Roads there on Twitter/X if you want to know exactly when it will be releasing. I will always post it there. Shout out to WVSportsNow.com. Always appreciative of them for hosting our episodes as well. If you're on the YouTube side, be sure to subscribe here. A ton of Mountaineer football content coming throughout each week. That's in addition to, of course, the 2 podcast episodes that you get as well here with our review and our previews. And then one more time, got to remind you guys, head over to magicmind.com/countrylt. Try that mental performance shot, guys. Promise you won't regret it. And if you do, use code CountryLT20 at checkout. Get 48% off a subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase. But having said that, that'll wrap us up here for episode 193. Albany has been reviewed and reacted to. West Virginia with the 49-14 victory. A lot of positives, a few negatives, but all things that I think that we can improve on and still have a successful 2024 season. And I'm hoping to see us do it, just as I'm sure all of you all are throughout Mountaineer Nation. Currently in 2024, West Virginia 1-1 on the season, looking to get above 500 with a big Backyard Brawl victory. That's what we look ahead to now, is the Backyard Brawl. Albany in the rear view, Penn State in the rear view. West Virginia is going to continue to improve throughout this 2024 season and be a good football club. I truly believe that, and hopefully they come out and show it with the Backyard Brawl coming up this week. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be a fun one. Can't wait to talk about it with you guys here in the future. As always, I'm Jorden Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.
If you really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those